Greetings, students. Mr. Little here, and today we're going to have a look at this text-based SAQ, specifically this excerpt from The Rights of Man and Citizen published by the National Assembly during the French Revolution. So let's have a look at the text here, shall we? I'll read along and then let's go ahead and talk about the questions. So the text reads as follows. This is a modified excerpt. The representatives of the French people constituted into a national assembly, considering that ignorance of the rights of man are the sole cause of public misfortune, are resolved in a solemn declaration the natural, inalienable, and sacred rights of man. And then we see some of, but not all of the articles. We see Article 1, men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Article 2, the goal of any political association is the conservation of natural and imprescriptible rights of man. These are liberty, property, safety, and resistance against oppression. Article 3, the principle that any sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. No body, no individual can exert authority which does not emanate expressly from it. Article 10, no one may disturb his opinions, even religious ones, provided that their manifestation does not trouble the public order or established law. Any citizen thus may speak, write, print freely, except to respond to the abuse of this liberty in the case determined by law. Property being an inviolable and sacred right, no one can be deprived of private usage. Okay, so we have a nice long chunk of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Now, I can't promise that if you see this on the AP exam, it will actually be this long. It might be a bit shorter. You might only get one or two articles, but we're going to take a look at a larger piece. So if we take a look at the questions here, we have an identify question. So an Enlightenment idea present in this document. Explain one way in which Enlightenment ideas spread throughout Europe during this time period. And explain one consequence of the spread of ideas, such as the ones explained here. Okay, so we have one identify question, two explain questions. So before we get going and actually sort of look at how we might answer these questions, it's always important to remember that what you want to do during an SAQ is you want to ace the SAQ. This is an acronym you should always remember. You want to answer the question by providing a direct response. You want to cite your evidence, providing a specific example of the claim, and then you want to explain your evidence. Provide a reason why your evidence supports the claim and the reason why this evidence is related to the question at hand. So remember to ACE, ace the SAQ. But with that said, let's take a look at what are some of the possible answers to these questions. Well, what Enlightenment ideas do we see in this document? Well, there's quite a few. Honestly, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen is probably the most Enlightenment-heavy document of all of the documents in the AP exam. So there's political equality, Article 1. There's limited government. The document itself is an example of limited government. That is, it limits the power of the government. You have secularism because you have the free expression of religion, and there's not an established state religion. You do have natural rights, as in Article 2. These are liberty, property, safety, and resistance against oppression. So, honestly, take your pick. These are all pretty much, it's up for grabs here. Now, how does it spread? How does the Enlightenment spread across Europe? Well, there's a couple possible reasons there. Now, it doesn't specify what time period we're talking about. So we could be talking about pre-revolution, during the revolution, after the revolution. And so there's lots of possible answers here. There could be the Enlightenment salons, that are the salons where people got together and talked about ideas, mostly in France. There's the Republic of Letters, which is like the salons, except letters mailed between France and Italy and Russia and the United States, or the 13 colonies. It wasn't the United States back then. There's the printing press, which allowed books to be spread and people to read more ideas from further away. There's also the fact that the French Revolution spread a lot of these ideas through both the revolution itself and then the later spreading of the revolutionary ideas through the age of Napoleon when he conquers Europe. And the fact that some monarchs, even before the French Revolution, adopted Enlightenment ideas, such as Spanish monarchs, Portugal, Denmark, Russia, under Catherine the Great. So there's lots of possible ways that these Enlightenment ideas spread. And then what about the consequences of the ideas described here? Well, there's all sorts of possible consequences. The big one is nationalism that kind of jumps out at me because Article 3 talks about the nation, right? And this is where we're going to get that idea of nationalism. The nation is the source of all authority, and that's going to lead to nationalism, unification of some states. The revolutions of 1848 sought to get these rights of the Declaration of Man and Citizen implemented across Europe. There is the right to liberty and property, which is going to signal the liberal-conservative divide in much of European and Latin American politics for the next 100 years. And of course, there's the long-term effect of the Industrial Revolution. Protection of property is going to be one of the catalysts for the Industrial Revolution. So there's really all sorts of possible responses to this question. So what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and pause the video and maybe see if you can take 5 minutes and write up one of these, A, B, or C, and go ahead and pause the video. I'm not going anywhere. All right. So let's have a look at what I wrote. So this is what I wrote. And it's always important to remember that there's always multiple answers. There's multiple ways to do an SAQ. This is just the way I've chosen to answer it as an example of how to do an SAQ, specifically through the ACE method. So for an identify question, you only ever have to actually identify. You don't have to explain. So it's the A and the C, but not the E part. So an Enlightenment idea present in this document is natural rights, as we can see from Article 2. Okay. One way the ideas of the Enlightenment spread across Europe was military conquest, specifically the wars of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's conquest of almost all of Europe spread Enlightenment ideas such as those in the Doromac. Doromac is a fancy way of saying this document, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, via the conquest of other lands whose leaders would not allow them normally. One consequence of the spread of Enlightenment ideas was nationalism. For example, the idea of a united Germany. German nationalists believed they had natural rights to demand unification under a single government in a united fatherland, influenced by the ideas of popular sovereignty. Those two ideas, natural rights and popular sovereignty, have their most popular roots in the Enlightenment. So this is the way I've chosen to do this SAQ. You might have a slightly different way, and that's perfectly fine, but it's always good to practice. Want to practice some of the other possible answers? I would encourage you to take a look at those again, but I hope this helped. I hope this helped. My name is Mr. Little, and I'll see you next time. Hey there. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was able to help you. If you appreciate this kind of work, please like and subscribe. And of course, I welcome any kind of feedback or suggestions, so feel free to leave a comment down below. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Mr. Little, and I'll see you next time.